For once in my life, I'm going to be normal. It's a bad start. This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
And I'm just kind of worried that D&D will stop being cool because it's so popular.
It's not that popular.
We need more toys.
Are you a toy collector?
No.
It's kind of a small mimic, IMO.
D&D Direct.
And to just ask the question, is this good for your game and is it good for the overall hobby?
I was hoping for a little bit more.
But if you want the authentic D&D experience, this is where you come for true authenticity.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms. My name is Ben Byrne, here joined as always by Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And James, I have to ask, aren't you tired of when you're running a monster, looking for a book for the stat block, looking through your notes for the stat block? You know, wouldn't you rather just be able to look at one of your players' t-shirts and get all the rules directly
Objection,
from
you're
there?
on a leading question.
Ben, I've often felt this way. In fact, many people are saying this.
Well, do I have news that is breaking up until this point for you? Some Instagram account called Shop Culture Fly is touting a collab between the clothing brand Champion and D&D. You are going to feel like a champion fighter in these clothes, let me tell you.
I'm looking at these pictures and I'm not usually the kind of guy to get excited by these D&D X brand name sort of clothing collabs. Usually because I just don't think they look very good. And because there are all these very fancy brands putting out clothes that are just like, yeah, okay. But Champion is like a kind of working class sportswear brand here in the States, at least. And they're the best looking D&D branded sweaters and stuff like that I've ever seen. So I'm legitimately excited about these. These look really good. And
practical as well. There's spell lists on here for druids and wizards. You know, someone who I know is all about D&D merch, Shawn Merwin. It's not a car, but we're going to print stat blocks on cars in the future. Could I interest you in a pullover? What do they call it in the US? A sweater? Could I interest you in one of those?
A sweatshirt. Yeah, there were many a day in my college life where I would go to Champion Outlet and get a whole new wardrobe for like $10. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm down with Champion. And hey, if I can kill my player characters faster, I have to be careful with the group I play with, because I can see the stat block on their shirts. Absolutely, yeah, sign me up.
Now, Dael Kingsmill, you might want to keep some extra like jackets or like a nightie or not a nightie. What am I? What do you wear over the top of pajamas? What is?
Yeah, a nightie or a dressing gown.
Dressing gown, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. You might want to keep a dressing gown around because if you're running an owlbear and suddenly Steve walks in wearing his owlbear shirt, all the players are going to know the stats for the owlbear, but it's going to look sick.
Particularly with my dressing gown.
Okay.
How is a dressing gown relevant,
and
Ben?
fashionable?
Because you got to cover it up. If Steve's wearing his owlbear stats and you're like, here's an owlbear, and then all the players are just looking at Steve's shirt.
Like, okay, this is very cool, so I have to wear it, but also I don't want them to see that I'm wearing it, so I'll cover it up.
I now want a dressing gown of the Magi.
Ooh.
For Christmas, you can all chip in and get me one. That raises my caster level.
Just letting everybody know where I'm going to ask Shawn Merwin, did you wear your wizard costume to the D&D movie?
I put it on before I left. I combed the hair and the beard to make it perfect. Took it off to get with the rest of my day. Then got distracted while we were leaving because there was car problems and problems with the tickets. And we got 10 minutes away from the house and I had forgotten it.
So relatable, so tragic.
It was, do I turn around and be 20 minutes late for dinner or just go? And I'm an early person. I'm not a late person. as we mentioned earlier, so I had to carry on without the costume, but I was torn.
We're going to do a spoiler cast after this episode of the Lorecast, so no spoilers in this episode of the Lorecast. If you've seen the movie and you want to come back and hear our deep dive thoughts on it, come back in like an hour. Well, stay here now, but hang out with us in an hour and we'll do that. But just for the regular Lorecast viewers, Shawn, what's your 1-2 sentence review of the D&D movie?
Non-D&D fans can enjoy this action-packed, jaunty fantasy romp. And D&D fans can enjoy it for the nods to and the jokes about the game that they love.
Love it. Would you recommend?
Absolutely.
Great fun. A movie from a pre-Marvel era. Chris Pine is the inheritor of Harrison Ford's effortless roguish charm.
Okay. Oh, that's a big call.
Great fun. Popcorn movie. Bring your kids.
Oh. I was about to agree with you, but then I was like, no, save it for later. What? Do you recommend? Do you suggest people go see this movie?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to see it at least 2 more times.
I definitely suggest people go see this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's as deep as a puddle of water. It's certainly not the Banshees of Inisherin or anything like that, but it is a lot of fun, and I was literally crying with laughter in one scene.
I would love to see Martin McDonagh's take on D&D, though.
That would be fantastic. It just ends completely unresolved. You're left as a shattered person at the end of it. A week later, we had the D&D Direct, which I think we'll rapid fire through some of the talking points there. But also going on right now is the D&D Creator Summit, which some folks are physically presently at. We're going to talk more about that probably next week, but there was the Digital Creator Summit, which was happening basically at the same time over the last 8 hours. And we have a spy on the inside. We have someone from Ghostfire who was at or is at that part of the summit. I believe I'm allowed to air the answers to some of the questions that were posed to Wizards of the Coast. So we will get to that in a moment. Let's start with the D&D Direct. Sorry, there's a lot of build up for this.
Now I just want to talk about that. That's the problem with this much news, is that you do a summary at the start, and I just want to jump to the most recent thing you said. Go on.
That's fair. That's
D&D
fair.
Direct.
Well, how does D&D Minecraft excite you, Dael?
I think it's a good idea. I very briefly, at some point, Colville invited me to an MCDM server of Minecraft, and it was the first time I'd ever played. I lost a week. I was I kept getting called out when they would find me online at 4 a.m. playing Minecraft. And then suddenly I stopped playing. But I could see myself getting dragged back into it. So I'm not, particularly knowledgeable or skilled when it comes to Minecraftian habits, but I think it's a good fit. I think mimics are going to be a great addition to Minecraft.
Yeah, I'm very much like Dael. I'll play it in very short, very intense bursts. And I haven't played with other people in quite some time. I played it with at least one other person a lot when I was in college, and I played it solo a lot last year. I don't know if it will really hold my interest, just like you, Dael, but the new coat of paint will be exciting and fun. And Minecraft is still just one of the most popular games for kids out there. And I think channeling some of that creative energy that honestly even pen and paper D&D ignites in me into creating stuff in Minecraft seems like a great marriage of two creative ideas.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've seen a couple of dungeons from adventures. I want to say Tomb of Annihilation, possibly Lost Mines of Phandelver, created in Minecraft, which is kind of cool. And the idea of being able to take players as their little Minecraft avatars through a dungeon that you've built yourself and literally populate it with monsters that they have to fight through while you as the DM are kind of just present there, standing in the corner, I don't know, narrating something or kind of describing the story
really
as it unfolds.
Aw.
Yeah, it's almost like the virtual tabletop we actually want. It's because Minecraft is virtual Legos in a way. Shawn, are you pro Minecraft D&D?
I am. I remember when Minecraft first came out and I thought, okay, I'll check this out. And I played it for about 10 minutes and I thought, this isn't for me. I could see myself getting really into it, hooked into it and not sleeping. So let's just put it down. But I have friends with young children who play together with them. Add to that choosing a class and rolling D20s and fighting monsters. And you have the beginnings of a great D&D relationship that could bloom into something magical, like actually sitting down and playing a real game of D&D. And that's what I'm all about. I want to see more people playing the game we love. And if it takes going through the games that they love to do it, I'm down with that.
A lot of the love of D&D when I was getting into it, for a lot of people, not just me, was that there was something kind of countercultural about it. And I'm just kind of worried that D&D will stop being cool because it's so popular.
It's not that popular.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. You've
popular than
assuaged
it's
all
ever
my
been,
worries.
but I will say this is not a spoiler. This is not a spoiler, but I will point out that when I went to see the D&D movie again last night, the people at the counter were dressed as the characters from the Mario movie that has not been released yet. No one cared about the D&D movie. So that's where we're at. We have a movie.
As long as we're uncool nerds still, I'm so happy.
My heart is already breaking for how much Mario is going to trounce the D&D movie because that Mario movie. Anyway, just to clarify, Cosmic Postman mentioned in the chat, I believe having looked closer at the D&D Minecraft announcement, it is like a set adventure. I think they were saying there's like a hub area where you can shop and kind of it feels like a D&D village, and then you go out and do pre-made dungeons. It's meant to be about 10 hours of gameplay from what they were saying. My hope, I don't know this, but my hope is that they still release, because I don't know how packs with Minecraft tend to work, but they release all the assets that come with that DLC as usable assets when building dungeons, like being able to put a mimic in a dungeon that you're building in base Minecraft if you've downloaded the DLC. That's my hope on how it works. I think
but that would be good.
The other thing that they have released is Minecraft monsters on D&D Beyond. There's a little pack with stat blocks that you can go download right now. You can go claim it, much like you claimed Vecna and the D&D movie magic items, which we kind of glossed over before. So that's cool. Go do that. Dael Kingsmill, don't you just feel like you've got some spare shelf space in your house at the moment that could just really use a beholder floating above it right about now?
Sure.
Well, have I got the perfect thing for you? Because also announced in the D&D Direct were the Hasbro toy line that they're bringing out, which includes very detailed, very beautiful looking Xanathar toy, a Displacer Beast, an owlbear.
So we have our new Golden Archive Xanathar, our lore-inspired owlbear, and then our Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves Displacer Beast.
Any of these catch anybody's fancy? They look super cool. I just can't justify the cost of collectible toys.
Look great. I want even more toys. I will have suggestions in an hour's time when we're talking about the D&D movie. I have suggestions because I think we need more toys.
Are you a toy collector? Is anybody here as opposed to miniatures?
I probably would not buy them for myself because having too much stuff stresses me out, but I will feel comfort in knowing that they exist.
I have a few collectible figurines, but not a ton. I think I would buy a toy of a D&D iconic figure if it was one I really liked, but I'm not a collector.
That's fair. The Xanathar did catch my eye. When I saw a picture of it, because I didn't watch the D&D Direct at 3 a.m. Live, so I was seeing like articles and stuff about it before I saw the actual Direct. The Xanathar did look really cool. When I thought it was like some sort of special miniature, I was like, I want that. And then I found out it was much larger and likely much more expensive. And I was like, I don't want that, but it still looks super cool. Magic the Gathering, throwing it over to our Magic the Gathering expert, Dael Kingsmill. Secret Lair has
It's a sad
been
state of
announced.
affairs when I'm the MTG expert.
Do you still play Magic the Gathering actively at all?
I mean, off and on. I've always been like a kitchen table Magic person.
What does that mean?
It means that I play it at the kitchen table. It means that I don't tend to go to like competitions or necessarily go to my gaming store to play with strangers. But I have friends and family who also have decks, and we will play against each other at the kitchen table.
Gotcha.
And so I, come in and out depending on how cool I think a given set is. When they did their werewolf set, I was in. I'm in.
They are getting a lot of use out of the artwork that they made for the characters from the D&D movie, because they're now Magic the Gathering cards. They're the artwork for the stat blocks. They were used for something else. So good on Wizards for that. I'm just slamming through the kind of rapid fire things here. The Neverwinter MMO. Oh man, I'm going to challenge myself to pronounce this. I heard it pronounced like 3 times. Menzoberranzan.
Yeah.
You done did it. That's how you pronounce it.
Great. The Neverwinter MMO is getting a Menzoberranzan expansion, which was originally authored or is authored in part by R.A. Salvatore, who is the creator of Drizzt and, as far as I'm aware, Menzoberranzan. Wrapped into that announcement is also that there is an R.A. Salvatore book, part 3 of Way of the Drow, coming in August this year. Which I don't think was a secret because they've been releasing books each August for the last 2 years, is part 3. Is anybody a big MMO and or R.A. Salvatore fan?
No. However,
excited for this?
I recently discovered I was over at my sister-in-law's parents' house this weekend for a big family gathering. And apparently my sister-in-law's dad, who has never once played a game of D&D, who probably would barely even know the phrase Dungeons and Dragons if you said it to him, owns something like 20 Drizzt books. Because he is a huge fan of fantasy fiction, and sight unseen, brand unrelated, has fallen in love with the works of R.A. Salvatore. And I don't know if he is a strange outlier or indicative of trends that simply go unnoticed to us. But honestly, given the fact that Bob Salvatore's books make it onto New York Times bestseller lists not infrequently, I suspect that's actually the main market of people who read Forgotten Realms books.
This was also, that was probably my favorite part of D&D Direct. I found that the most interesting, the little interview with him, because it just felt like insightful and like there was so much heart in that section of the thing. Yeah. And I've never read a Drizzt book in my life. So I don't know. I get it. I get how people could just kind of grab onto that without any connection.
Wizkids, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They're doing a giant mimic statue that is not functional. It's just a giant mimic statue. One of my favorite things that a colleague of mine used to say when I was working at EB, when we had the toys on the shelf, when a parent would come in and ask, "What does this do?" my manager would say, "Whatever it does, it's doing it right now." That's what this mimic does. And so does the baby owlbear statue that Wizkids are also releasing. So cool collectible items if you like to fill your house with cool collectible items.
I have not been able to get a sense of scale of those things. I've been assuming they're big. Are they big?
The mimic is 20 inches, I think. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think it was 20 inches. So
tall?
It's kind of a small mimic, IMO.
I've never been eaten by one, so I wouldn't know.
I assume it's kind of as big as and this is going to be a very vague unit of measurement, as big as a stool, just imagine like a stool that you put your feet up on near a couch, and that's as big as the mimic is, at a guess.
Okay. All right.
Sort of a lockbox sized mimic rather than a full on treasure chest size.
Maybe it's a baby mimic too.
Baby mimic for the baby owlbear, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can get your baby mimic from Wizkids. Apparently they have broken contamination.
Search for this life-sized mimic, which recently escaped containment from the Wizkids' top secret research facility.
Part of the D&D Direct did entertain me as well, I have to admit. It was really cheesy, but it was kind of funny. And then just last on the rapid fire things before we have something to really sink our teeth into. Joe Manganiello bemoaned apparently that he didn't have his Dragonlance TV show yet. Just kind of slipped that in there to the announcement for some reason.
Working tirelessly to develop a live-action version of the Dragonlance novels that have never been far from my thoughts throughout all these years since I first read them. But I'm here today.
Anyway, here's this documentary that I'm doing. It's like just strong-arm Netflix or someone into making this series for him. How excited are we for the D&D documentary, which is coming next year?
I will watch it. I will see what it says. I don't know how much of a homer, it's going to be in terms of, is it just all praising D&D and how great D&D is? And I hope it's like that. I don't need another, let's talk about all of the TSR infighting and all of the satanic panic, and let's get something out there in the public that shows all the good that D&D does for people. All the lives it's changed for the better by encouraging people to be social and to engage their imaginations and do good things with other people.
It's a really fine line to walk, right? Because I can see this easily being just an unwatchable puff piece. But yeah, I don't want another sort of drudge through the dark ages either. It would be really cool to see documentary material that talks about the things that are going on around D&D. But we often talk about on the Lorecast how it's hard to do news about D&D week to week. It's usually just product announcements. We don't want to just advertise.
Yeah.
But like my dad, who's a news reporter here in Seattle on local radio, did a piece on oh my God, I'm forgetting what they're called now, but a duo of clinical psychologists who are using D&D to help encourage social skills in neurodivergent people, autism spectrum people, usually age 15 and younger. And that's such an awesome, cool piece. I would love to see, a 5-10 minute segment on that in the Where is D&D Going segment of this documentary, if such a thing would even exist.
Yeah. I find it's often frustrating if a documentary is being made about something that you love and are interested in, and you go to watch it and it feels a bit like, a beginner's class on what is D&D, right? And you spend the majority of the documentary covering bases that you've already covered. So a lot of it is going to come down to who are the target audience? Are we trying to reach out to new people, or are we reaching out to the pre-existing community? And then on top of that, sort of like Shawn was saying, is it going to be inward facing, talking about the people who make D&D and sort of the timeline and history of that? Or is it going to be about the community and weird little, avenues and alcoves within that community? And I have my preferences and other people will have theirs. We'll just have to see what direction they go in.
One thing I will say about Joe producing this is that Joe is really good friends with Luke Gygax. And the Gygax family is a rather schismatic one because Gary Gygax's, I believe, second wife, his widow, is a very schismatic figure. She did not much like the way that some of Gary's descendants handled his legacy. And I don't think she's in the right. I don't think that Gail Gygax is in the right personally. She's very, very protective in a way that seems somewhat controlling to me. Whereas Luke loves to kind of share and celebrate the things that his father created, and so on and so forth. And why this is exciting to me is because I think even a sort of beginner level documentary would be very cool if there's a lot of stuff we've never seen before, a lot of artifacts, a lot of stuff from the vault. And I think Joe, by virtue of working with the Gygaxes and with Wizards of the Coast, there's a lot of artifacts that can be put on display here. Less than a decade ago, Wizards of the Coast discovered they were doing an inventory of their holdings and discovered that they owned a warehouse in Wisconsin, and they did not know what the warehouse was. And they went out to the warehouse in Wisconsin and found that it was a byproduct of their buyout of TSR, which had a lot of lost TSR era merch and stuff in it. Now, I don't exactly know if this is just, stuff that never got sold, if it's like lost product, or if it's like actual manuscripts and things that were, sealed away when TSR folded. But there's kind of a treasure trove hidden out there in the world. If someone wants to do an actual dungeon crawl to the real Tomb of Horrors and heist TSR's lost gold.
See, but that story, that and the missing map that we covered on an episode a while back, that's the kind of stuff that I would love to see talked about in the documentary. I want these weird little sort of stories, these narratives that pop up in amongst stuff. That's what I'm interested in seeing.
With that all being said, time to sink our teeth into what I think is probably the biggest news out of the D&D Direct, which is a clearer demonstration of the virtual tabletop, which they previewed, which is apparently in a pre-alpha state. And the things that they wanted to hit with it, they were saying was
fun, convenience, and authenticity,
which is something that they've apparently repeated during the Creator Summit, which is happening right now. What did we think of the virtual tabletop, the look at it we got so far? Are we excited for this? Are we trepidatious about this?
Yes, all the above. It's great for the people that want a tool that can do these things. If it enhances their game, if it enhances their enjoyment. I think when a lot of people look at it, they say, I don't even like to use D&D Beyond on my tablet. I want dice and character sheets and maybe a map and minis, but I want to be able to interact directly with my players and talk with them. And that's what the game is for me. So if we fall in love with these tools, will that eliminate my ability to enjoy the game that I want to play? And it's there's a little bit of, I don't want the thing I love to change. And we can set that aside because that's just anti-progressive nonsense that everyone feels at some point about something. And to just ask the question, is this good for your game and is it good for the overall hobby? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. But also when I hear pre-alpha release, I've been involved in software in the past, and I know that pre-alpha release could mean anything. It could mean, boy, this is a video that we made using completely different tools, and we would love it to look like this. Or it could be, this is actually where we are using the software and we are actually at a beta stage already, but we're going to call this pre-alpha just in case the whole system blows up.
Jay Pizza Beats from Twitch chat asks a particularly interesting question. I'm wondering if we'll be able to customize the VTT rule enforcement, like house rule crit mechanics. And there was something in the pre-alpha demonstration from D&D Direct that I think doesn't directly address this, but it gives me actually quite a bit of hope.
Oh, once you get to the end of that, you can't move anymore, because that's not really D&D to us. It's like, if your DM's okay with it and you want to do a flip and land on the table, then that's just how the game gets played.
So yeah, just draw it out however far you want to go, and then you can move. Then you'll know exactly how far you want to move. And I think that's such an incredible design philosophy. It seems so simple to us D&D players, but so many virtual tabletops kind of lock you into 100% rules fidelity. And you have to really jump through hoops in order to change it. I'm quite hopeful that they will kind of make this as a tool set that you can use however you want to.
It will be interesting to see, because we know that it has compatibility with D&D Beyond, that you click a button and add your character sheet from D&D Beyond to have it translate into the VTT. It will be interesting because, people who've created homebrew on D&D Beyond probably know that you can create homebrew subclasses, but not classes, for example. So I think it will depend on how deeply homebrewed your stuff is. But yeah, like James was saying, I also am hopeful, based exclusively on that statement about movement, that they are allowing room for you to do stuff sort of around the edges, because I think that is important if they want people to pick it up and give it a go. I will say, I know it's early days. I know there's so much more to come. But I was hoping for a little bit more. I was hoping for a little bit, maybe not more. More might be the wrong word. I was hoping for something different. I was hoping to see what the edge is that makes you want to choose this virtual tabletop over another one. Because what I saw was, they really emphasized, I think at some point they specifically said something about the spell animations, for example, which I'm a little wary of because we know from the contracts that we were seeing around the time of the OGL that what they seemed to be trying to do was stopping other virtual tabletops from being able to animate those things. And therefore, their virtual tabletop would have the edge of having those animations. That seemed to be the angle they were taking. And I'm not seeing from this demonstration a lot that they're bringing to the table that is different from other VTTs, even things that they weren't ready to show yet, like the different lighting or weather systems, like the rain, right? We see those things in the Tailspire beta that we have. You can change the lighting conditions, you can create fog, things like that. So not seeing that in this VTT demonstration, while the rest of it visually still looks basically like Tailspire. The one thing I will say, you get that cool animation of the monster sort of digging its way up from underground. That was really cool. So if we're going in the direction of animation, give me more animation. Give me weapon swings. Give me kobolds glancing around nervously. You know what I mean? Tiny little things like that, I think would make a big difference for making this virtual tabletop stand out amongst the crowd.
And if I can just say, I don't think the spell animations that we saw in that trailer were particularly impressive. That magic missile, in particular stands out to me because we have...
And to cast magic missile with all of them focused on the Ankeg.
Oh, we're going to put everything in the monster?
Something like 3 illustrations of magic missile being cast in 5e products, and they have a particular look to them. They're like paper thin, kind of jagged, runic darts that shoot in a straight line. And like there is actual sort of history of art being conformed to that. Like back in the Player's Handbook 2014, there's a image of Magic Missile being cast, and that artist has a big blog post on the notes they got in the sketch phase for that particular piece of art, where they got, one of their original sketch had this very cool sort of spiraling, spinning pattern as the missiles kind of swerved their way to the target in a Magic Missile style that I really liked. The wizard said, no. They will be perfectly straight. They will travel in an unerring straight line. And, that's fine. But the magic missiles from the VTT look nothing like the magic missiles in the official D&D art, which is like, if you're making an in-house VTT, what's the point if it's not going to look like D&D?
That is an interesting thing. There doesn't seem to be a very defined aesthetic direction. The aesthetic direction seems to be, we're going to make it look like minis on a tabletop, which is cool, but nothing about it necessarily screams D&D to me. And I would love to see more of that sort of brand stamp on this one. If you're making an official one, go in.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of like the virtual tabletop. The look of it defines the game that you're running a little bit. If I'm always trying to encourage players, and I, as the GM, whenever I cast a spell, I'm always trying to describe it in the most imaginative way that I can, and ensuring that spells don't have to look exactly as described, because in the games that I like to run, the way I like to think about magic is that it is more like colors that you're painting with rather than stamps that you're stamping down on a page, if that analogy makes much sense. Like a spell is not a single
DM question. What does your Eldritch Blast look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. What does your Eldritch Blast look like, And so, yeah, I have kind of concerns around that. I would say in terms of like what the magic missile looks like specifically being in pre-alpha, maybe they're going to, maybe tweaking those animations is going to be something that kind of comes into the polish phase of this software later on down the road. So I wouldn't assume that any of the animations necessarily, especially, are final to what they will look like. But I was concerned about the look of 4 or 5 friends sitting around a table to play D&D with their laptop screens up, kind of cutting off each other's view of the other person, and their hands on their mouse and their focus very much on the screen, as opposed to being focused on each other, you know? And during the demonstration, they show off a little bit of role play, and they are making eye contact, and they are looking at each other and kind of speaking to each other. But it definitely has the feel of a LAN party in an in-person context than it does necessarily like a board game or a game of imagination, freeform and imagination and D&D. I think as a tool to use for folks that are distanced from each other, that are isolated for whatever reason, whether it's geographically or some other reason they need to be, I think it's going to be great for that. And I do have some answers to some of the questions that you were just positing each other based on stuff that was coming out of the Creator Summit digital edition, as questions were being asked about the virtual tabletop. Again, what was repeated was that the goal of the virtual tabletop is fun, convenience, authenticity, which is a turn of phrase that I find interesting, and immersion was a fourth kind of thing that they added. They said that they like automation to help speed up things that people don't want to do, improve utility and usability, but they don't want to make a video game. So my impression from what they're saying, we don't want to make a video game, is that they want the tools to be open enough that players can funk around with them and kind of bring in house rules and change rulings and all that sort of thing without it being fully automated. They talked about when the playtest will be available and who will be able to access it later in the year. They said this will be open later in the year. They said initially it'll be open to folks working at Wizards and their friends, so sort of Wizards employees encouraged by the sounds of it to take the virtual tabletop to their home game. Then they're going to look at influencers and streamers who will show it off, I presume, and be able to test it out and kind of tell the public what they think of it. And then it will be kind of shown or made accessible to a few D&D Beyond subscribers. I'm not sure what they mean by, like, I'm not sure how you get in to be one of the lucky few, but it sounds like definitely a sort of closed beta period like a video game would have. I'm going to read a bit more of this, but
they should do a golden ticket lottery. They should put golden tickets in their, I don't know, books that they sell.
Well, it seems to me like...
Oh, in the mimics. In the mimics. They have a function now.
Yes.
It seems to me like there's a non-zero chance that at least one member of the Lorecast will get their hands on this virtual tabletop before public release. So, I mean, there's a fun bonus bit of content if we can make it happen.
I'm tallying up in my head which of us has the most friends at Wizards of the Coast.
Well, I'm telling in my head who's the most streamer of us.
Oh, well, you know what I was just thinking would be cool to see? I would love to see someone do like a short run campaign where each session they try out a different virtual tabletop and in the mix do the D&D official virtual tabletop. Just, you know, put them back to back to back, see which ones are the most intuitive for players coming in, you know, completely fresh.
Will the VTT have other systems such as Black Flag? And the answer was, if you want to do things manually, okay, so this kind of ties into what I was saying before. If you want to do things manually, you can do whatever you want. So anything that has dice and miniatures, but it won't have the D&D automation. There will be more ability to homebrew rules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Respectfully.
Again, if you homebrew on D&D Beyond, you know that it's basically just that you write words and it will display those words on the character sheet. It doesn't know how to do any of the functions.
I'm going to be a little mean jokingly, but like, come on. What did you expect him to say, guy who asked that question? This is their in-house VTT. No. They're very fine to ask that question. It's good to get that clarification. I'm just being
Hey,
mean.
Pizza Hut, can I buy Coke at your store? Sir, we're owned by Pepsi.
Yeah.
Well, I want Coke,
that ties into... That ties into the idea of their word around authenticity, because it sounded to me when they were saying it in the D&D Direct, what did they say? Fun, accessibility, or convenience, I think was the word they used. And those two are like, yeah, the virtual tabletop should be fun, and it's aiming to be convenient, especially for people geographically isolated. But the authenticity word jumped out at me as that sort of phrase, which is like, you could play D&D on another virtual tabletop. You could play D&D with just your pen and paper, but if you want the authentic D&D experience, this is where you come for true authenticity. And so that it kind of sounded like fun, convenience, and we need a third thing. What's the authenticity? Yeah, that sounds good. Let's throw that on there. Like it sounded really markety speechy to me.
If they're going to promise authenticity, they better give us the real magic missile. None of this stuff we saw earlier.
This is a deal breaker.
None of these off-brand magic missiles.
Full cream, baby. Lexington 005 in chat brought up something very interesting, which is that if they make D&D as a default online game and not a pen and paper in-person RPG, then it's easier to control how people get into the game. And I do think that is an interesting observation, particularly in terms of if you want to control the kind of interactions new players have with this game, if you want new players to watch the movie, get excited, I'm going to come and try out D&D, you can't control the variable of who their dungeon master is. But if that dungeon master is running the game via your virtual tabletop, which is integrated with D&D Beyond, you have a little bit more control of what that game is going to look like. If they do decide to sort of knuckle down on some of the rules and mechanics, which I mean is why it's a little bit interesting that it doesn't look like they super are.
Well, I mean, I've heard so many horror stories about very excited new D&D players getting their dreams crushed by the worst DMs imaginable. I can understand why they might want to do that, honestly.
Hyphen Hedgehog points out that Jim Dark Magic's magic missile is gluten-free, though, and that is true.
I
made that spell.
Green chickens.
I made that spell, and it is gluten-free. I tested it myself.
A question that got asked during the Digital Creator Con, the VTT was demanding and we were playing it on Alienware laptop. So I assume this is maybe from someone who was there. What are the specs? And the answer was can't answer now, which is interesting because that is a big question. Is what is the if the intention of this is to be convenient and accessible, and this is something that Dante and I have debated back and forth or pondered upon with each other. Is this going to be, if it's running on Unreal? Do you need a gaming PC? Does everybody at your table need a gaming PC to be able to run this thing? Right. Or is it enough or is it streamed sort of, by wizards and you're just playing it in the cloud? How is that going to function? Because I remember early lockdown, I tried, I think it was Astral Virtual Tabletop was one of the first ones that I went to. The problem with Astral is everybody needed a good computer to be able to run Astral and stay in the Zoom call that we had up at the same time. So it actually kind of almost became a barrier to being able to play as opposed to a convenience. So that's going to be, I think, a big question that as they develop
who's hosting the server, questions like that. I mean, when it's my understanding, this could be totally wrong, but it's my understanding that a game in alpha is almost always inevitably going to eat up a lot of RAM while you're running it. Yeah. So they probably just don't know the answer yet in terms of what the final version is going to require. But it is interesting. Visual effects like rain that you can turn on and off, and lighting effects and all these visually enticing things presumably will eat up a lot. And then you're right, running a voice call or a video call at the same time is going to be very demanding on a system. So, maybe including an in-game voice chat option is something that would be nice to see. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because it's sometimes already hard enough to get the voice call tech side of things to work if you're playing online.
Will there be functions similar to apps like GoDice/Bluetooth Dice? And the answer as written was, yeah, sure. I'm not sure if that was the actual tone that it was given in, but that's how I've read it. He's like, oh, yeah, why not? Somebody in the chat, Drogo Mistweave. Sorry, it took me a second to be able to read that from across this table. Drogo Mistweave has asked about price, and they did say something about that.
And the answer was, when you start something, you have to think about monetization. Right now, focuses on play, We're talking about those things, coming up with ideas. People don't switch to pay-to-play products. Playing the game is what immerses people together. There will be a download which allows people to play. Would love to answer more, but this is all I can share at the moment. Mysterious.
It is a little bit. It also raises the question, is it enough for one person to purchase it? Like, will there be like a DM code similar to D&D Beyond and now everybody has access to it? Or will everybody need to purchase their copy?
Surely that's the only way to go. It's so ingrained, right? Even in the role of the DM, you're the one who pays for everything.
Yeah, but they'd be trying to monetize their whole audience, right? That's the whole like problem with monetization of role-playing games.
Spot.
And even D&D Beyond does have the DM tier subscription where you can give players access to everything, but there's still the player tier subscription. Correct me if I'm wrong. You still need to pay for at least a base level D&D Beyond subscription to have more than 5 characters created at any one time.
5 or 6, something like that.
So it wouldn't surprise me if there's like tiers of
That's not necessarily true.
Okay.
At least it hasn't been in the past, because I have had friends say, hey, Joey, can you make a new campaign and invite me to it so I can make another free character in it?
Ooh, game the system.
Yeah. So definitely there's some element of DMs giving content to the players, or the player subscription tier is not necessarily needed. Because any character in a campaign is counted against the DM, not against its creator.
That's the D&D Beyond version of sharing your Netflix password.
Yeah,
100%.
Totally. We've got the Cosmic Postman in chat says, I know the idea of a VTT is the visual expression, but if you want to keep the evocative feel and not be entirely prescriptive with super detailed graphics that are also demanding, why not go with a pixel sprite art style like FTL or similar? And this is interesting to me. I don't think they're going to do it. I understand why you wouldn't. But I was thinking, specifically while watching D&D Direct and watching the virtual tabletop, I was thinking, wouldn't it be so cool if you had a dedicated virtual tabletop that was just in some kind of a sketchy or watercolor 2D art style, and you have isometric maps so you can do it with just the 2D art and, build it all so that it's, it's not fancy 3D, but it's evocative visually. And I think that's going to have to be up to some third-party company to do a really cool, visually directed virtual tabletop, because I would love to see it.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing.
Would you call that vague and evocative, Dael?
I would call that vague and evocative. I would be wearing a vague and evocative shirt right now, but last night I actually wore my vague and evocative shirt and my vague and evocative jumper, so they're in the wash.
Oh, Bearded Weird
also
chimed in with that, so good job.
Both of you, full
I wonder... This conversation makes me wonder if mods, in the way that we understand them in, say, like Skyrim, will be available for this, because that's something I could see being a graphical overhaul mod that would just do gangbusters.
Can you imagine if they opened this virtual tabletop to, mod workshopping?
I think they said they would. If you scan, now I don't want to promise this before we find the answer, but I'm going to scan it on my end, Dael. If you could have a look on your end.
I'm finding a marketplace, but I'm not entirely sure.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Well, let us jump forward, because we've only got a little bit of time left in this episode of the Lorecast. Let us just jump to the final part of the D&D Direct, which was actually about D&D the game, where they kind of ran through their Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4 version of what the adventure books coming out in the next little while are going to look like.
Let's start with Keys from the Golden Vault.
Next, we'll marvel at wondrous legends and giant civilizations in the book Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants.
After that, we'll further explore the mystery of the obelisks that have cropped up in so many of our adventures. Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk.
Next up is Planescape, Adventures in the Multiverse.
The Deck of Many Things.
Vecna as an otherworldly monster. But this villain's true cosmic horror will be unleashed in 2024 with a world-hopping adventure.
I'm psyched for Vecna and Red Wizards. Vecna was the villain in my first ever D&D campaign. I love him. Red Wizards, I love the Red Wizards. I've been wanting a Red Wizards adventure since they showed up as kind of a sidekick hero, enemy of my enemy hero in Rise of Tiamat back at the beginning of 5e. They rock. I love them. Let's see more.
the thing from there that I was the most excited about was the Red Wizards of Thay, which is new for me because, again, I don't know the lore. I think this is a byproduct of the movie, perhaps. Anyway, I was excited at the concept, and then I realized that it was so far in the future. This is why I hate announcements of announcements. Just tell me about it when it's happening, because I got excited and now I have to wait.
If you had given me this list 2 years ago and I had not said Planescape is going to just be the most incredible thing, I wouldn't have believed that me now is not saying Planescape, because it's just so much stuff being pushed at us. I want to see the simplest thing. I want the simplest thing to be cool. I want the Phandelver and Below adventure. I want to see what they do with this, with the 1D&D playtest going on, and with all the other products and all the marketing swirling around. It's hard to get excited for this huge amount of information and product being pushed at you when you can barely get your group together once a month to play. So I'm excited by all of it, but I need to step back and drink from a straw rather than from the fire hose.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a lesson here as well for people producing content. I across the board, I'm thinking of video games like Assassin's Creed. I'm thinking of movies like the Marvel movies. They're better if you give breathing time in between. I know that you want the money. I know it's exciting, but just take your time and make good products, because if you give people room to breathe, I think you end up with a longer lasting, more exciting line of products.
Yeah. Sword Compass also brings up a good point that in the Adventurers League, the Red Wizards have been a huge storyline. There is a whole separate campaign called Dreams of the Red Wizards that deal with the Red Wizards. And the announcement that they made was like, and finally we are going to give you this Red Wizards thing that you haven't seen a lot of. And the Adventure League folks are like, dude, we've been playing that for like the last 2.5 years. And it's been pretty cool.
That's so funny. Also, I mean, the timing is hilarious in terms of the movie as well, that you're going to have all these new players who are like, I want to fight Vecna or the Demogorgon, like from Stranger Things. I want to fight the Red Wizards like we see in the movie. And they're like, okay, well, if you just wait for 2 years.
Yeah, see, I was, this to me feels like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Because if they released it immediately on the tail of the movie, I'd be like, cash grab, cash in, absolutely preying upon new movie viewers. To be honest, I kind of like the fact that it's clear that they're thinking in parallel lines, but they're taking their time with it. They're not being like, and now a marketable connection. We're going to call it Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, because Baldur's Gate 3 just got announced.
Speaking of product fatigue and product bloat, which Arendelle is commenting on in the chat as well, the sort of mild opposite argument is that they're also providing kind of something for everyone. No, you can't be expected to necessarily play all of these adventures. But if you love Giants, maybe you're really hyped for Big B Presents Glory of the Giants because you're like, finally, I've wanted to do like a Giants themed campaign, and now I'm going to have more tools to be able to make that campaign. Or if you're jazzed for the Red Wizards, then you're like, yes, awesome, I'm going to get some Red Wizards content, and I'm really excited for that. The interesting thing here that's different is the way that they seem to be trying to, which was my perception of 5e initially, which was, I'll tell everybody what I'm talking about. My brain's firing off so quickly. When the early adventures of 5e were being released, my impression was Storm King's Thunder, Tomb of Annihilation, even like Rime of the Frost Maiden, I think all these Forgotten Realms set adventures were kind of happening on a loose timeline that you could stitch together and could be one adventure, because there were references in Tomb of Annihilation to like, there are some frost giants here, like wandering around looking for Arbor Simba, that dude. They don't really have much to do with this adventure, but they have to do with this other supplement adventure that you can then use as adventure hooks to draw your players across to play that adventure, like in the same universe, which I thought was really cool, but then seemed to kind of fall off a little bit as they started exploring other settings and other things.
I also think it fell off when they decided that every adventure they published was going to be from levels 3 to 7 or whatever they decided, you know?
And curiously, I think I can pinpoint the time that it happened. Waterdeep Dragon Heist originally had a specific year in the Forgotten Realms calendar that did not make it to the final print version.
Intriguing.
And that seems to me the inflection point of we don't want a meta plot in the Forgotten Realms. We don't want an ongoing timeline. These should be used as you see fit. In fact, you might even want to imagine that the Realms isn't experiencing a world-ending threat every month and create your own canon here.
It's also much better, easier if you are doing, say, movies and TV series set in the Forgotten Realms, not to have to pin everything down and then get people going online and saying, well, technically, this character is in 2 places at once because they're in this adventure and also in this TV series. And
you end up
with their heads.
You end up with your problem like the Dragon Age tabletop RPG has like a whole section of the book dedicated to, okay, you have to pick a time that you're playing your game in. You have to pick a setting date because it changes depending on where you are in that timeline from the canon. I do think it's also interesting, this idea of, trying to spread your net wide to get a book out there for everyone for their interest, because this goes back to what we were talking about during sort of the OGL crisis, is this idea that Wizards of the Coast are never going to be able to make a book for everyone, and any book that they make is not going to appeal to everyone. So that's the tricky thing with publishing adventure books or setting books. And that's where things like third-party publishers come in clutch, because they can be like, well, I freaking love giants, so I'm going to be the person who provides you with your giant themed adventure. I love this like location in, and you can have your Grim Hollows, right? You don't have to make your adventure that is catering to that specific genre love within the audience, because there are people there to pick up the slack, and there's a whole community and industry based around it. As much as I understand the drive to like, we got to get more books out because none of these are going to make a huge amounts of money, so we got to spread out. I don't know, man. Leave something for third parties.
Well, the other interesting thing is that the way that they're trying to connect this now, again, like it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's hard enough to keep up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and their 2-hour, 3-hour movies. And if you haven't seen the TV show, you're not going to know what's going on in Doctor Strange.
Also, I have a thing to say about this when the movie comes up.
Okay, cool. Speaking of which, we are running a little bit behind time, so I am going to close out this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. I hope you've enjoyed. Go, Dael, go.
I found what I think might be the reference that we were talking about in the document.
Okay,
there are other things that I would love to say, but I'll just have to say them another time. But this document is fascinating, by the way. Thank you, Ghostfire Insider, who sent this information. But there was a question about the path for D&D Beyond to support homebrew, including the virtual tabletop, which I think kind of has underneath the answer the implication of broader sort of mod style stuff. And they say, we haven't got there in terms of strategy. The high level is that they want the virtual tabletop to be an ecosystem. Interesting choice of words. Not 100% sure how it works, but they're definitely sort of looking in that direction by the sense of things. That's it.
It sounds like we're going to have a field day breaking down this document in the next Lorecast too. Not to spoil everything now, And
we'll have more from the summit by then.
Yeah.
That is true for a very specific reason, but I will keep that a secret until next week. Until then, you can find the Eldritch Lorecast on the device you are listening to it now, undoubtedly, where all good podcasts can be found. We're on YouTube. If you've listened to us if you're listening on YouTube, you should consider subscribing. That would be great. And we'd really appreciate that, because we're back every week with another episode of the Lorecast. My name is Ben Byrne, here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and we will be back next week. But if you're listening to the Twitch stream, we will also be back in 5 minutes because we're going to take a very quick, maybe 2-minute break, and then we'll be back talking all about the D&D movie. It is a spoiler cast. If you haven't seen the D&D movie yet, maybe go see that instead. But there will be a YouTube version of it as well, so you're not going to miss out either way. We'll be right back. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
All right, see you in 2.